Hey YouTube, so it's Monday morning. Unbelievably big change in the temps. If I show you here, this is still in the shade. It's 51 degrees, which is amazing. So we've got melting going on. We still have a lot of snow to melt, but it looks like it's going to be going pretty quickly now. So the bench is already empty. And the benches out there are also empty. So we have a couple little birdies and squirrels going after the feeder this morning, but other than that, everything's just a calm, nice, warm feeling day. So I don't have to put on all my clothes to go take the dog out. I could probably just put on one little thin jacket and be happy with that. And I guess Bullseye's probably dying over there to get out because he loves the spring. And this looks like a spring day, even though it's just the beginning of March. It would be amazing if it turned into a warm in March, warm in April, and warm in May. So we'll see what happens. From what I saw on the weather forecast, though, they're calling for snow next week. This is just unbelievable weather. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a good one, and I thank you for the comments about the business stuff. I'll see if I can do some more of those things to make an easier type of lecture, I guess I could say, so that you could so that somebody who hasn't been to school, as college or whatever, could use this, because it doesn't require a college education to be a businessman. All you have to do is be a good hard worker. Guys, I've been living on Earth here for almost 65 years. I think it'll be 65 in 2 months. And I thought I knew something about the weather. It seemed to follow patterns for 60 years pretty good. It is unfreaking believable. It is 51 degrees out. Not a cloud, well, some real, I don't know what kind of clouds you call them, but thin clouds up there, but the sun's shining nicely. It feels actually warm out. I put this on, and I really wouldn't need it if I was doing some work. I'm going to take the dog out again, but I just can't get over this weather. I mean, it's 51 degrees. We still got 8 inches of snow. So it's really something else. Looks like around 95 in the kiln. If it could only stay like this, I would be happy. I'm just tired of the changing. But what a difference today is from 2 days ago. 2 days ago I had all my heavy pants on, heavy coat, double coat, hat, gloves. I was tied up like a bunny rabbit, and now we have this. It's okay with me. Last night when I took the dog out, all of this stuff was frozen like a rock. And I wasn't sure of what was going to happen. I says to my wife, if it rains, we're going to be getting snow. And now here we are this morning, 51 degrees, and everything is melting like crazy. Sally asked me to do the chickens this morning, so to clean out their coop. So as warm as it is, it should be a good job for today. Hey guys, so I'm going to take you a little further with this contracting and agreements between people, just to give you a little bit of an idea of where you can start. Now, if I was going to start a business, no matter what it was, there's a lot of things you can do. I'm mainly talking here about written agreements. In other words, you have to put something on paper to protect either yourself or the other person. I'll explain that as I go. But here's the thing. If you have a sawmill, and let me tell you, an LT15 is not a big sawmill. However, it can cut a lot of lumber in a day. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the manufacturer says that there's something like 300 and some board feet per hour that you can cut. So if you're on the ball and you have a good helper and everything, and you have yourself laid out pretty well, you can do a lot of cutting in one day. So this is the reason why you might need a written contract or a written agreement. Now, you know, if you're cutting boards and you're stacking them up somewhere and people are coming over, your neighbors or whoever, and they're buying stuff, or even contractors are buying things off you because you have a steady supply, you don't really need a contract for that, okay? Because somebody's coming there and just buying what you have. They look it over, they like it, they buy it. Now, what I'm talking about is trying to get yourself a more defined income so that you can use that income to grow and to support yourself and your family if that's what you're looking to do. Okay, so here's the thing. In a written contract, the first thing you would want to do, you know, with a contract, and let me just say this before I even get started, I am not a lawyer, okay? So you need to talk to a lawyer. Even if you pay the guy for 1 hour and just sit down and ask him some serious questions to get some answers to things so that you know the basic legalities of your state or whatever with what you're going to do, okay? You know, he might be able to help you with some safety things and stuff like that. All right, so with that said, like I say, I'm not a lawyer, so you need to talk to a lawyer. That's my recommendation to you. But anyway, in a written agreement, what are some of the things that you need on a written agreement? Well, the first thing you have to do is make sure that you have in that agreement, you know, this is an agreement between the parties. And the parties are you, if you own the sawmill and the land, and you have rights to it to be able to make the wood, to be able to cut the wood, and the person you're going to cut the wood for. Now let's just say, we won't go real big here right away, but let's say you know a guy who is a carpenter and he's been making cabinets on weekends. And let's say that he's getting into it pretty hot and heavy. He's making like maybe 3 guys working making kitchen cabinets or whatever, anything at all out of wood. It could be furniture, lawn furniture, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the guy decides that he needs a good, cheap lumber. In other words, he needs good lumber, he wants it a certain size, and he wants to be able to get it at a good price so that he can sell his stuff at a price that's either lower than or comparable to the prices that other people are getting for, like, let's say, for lawn furniture or cabinets or whatever. Now, I don't know if you've ever gone and tried to buy custom-built cabinets, kitchen cabinets, but they are very expensive. A custom-built kitchen, maybe 12 foot long, might cost you as much as $12,000 depending on what all you want in it. And you can buy the same kitchen down at Lowe's for maybe $2,000, you know, depending upon what you buy. Now, I'm not saying that Lowe's is cheaper than the guy making custom cabinets. I'm not saying their cabinets are better or worse. I'm just saying there is a big difference in the cost of, you know, what you're buying. So that's one thing. So anyway, getting back to the names and addresses. So you have the names and addresses of both you and the other person. So in other words, you're identifying your business. You know, Joe Saljo's Sawmill, such and such a place, such and such a town, and the other person is, you know, whoever the person is, such and such a place, such and such a town, okay? All right, so that's how you identify who this is. Now let me just tell you, this doesn't sound hard, right? Let me tell you how hard this can be. Let's say your father buys a sawmill, all right? And your father tells you, yeah, you can use the sawmill for all you want. And for some reason, halfway through cutting the contract that you're cutting, your father-in-law says to you, or your father, I need the sawmill for a couple weeks to cut something someone asked me to cut. What are you going to do? I mean, you know, it's his sawmill. If he needs it, he needs it. So you want to make sure that when you're going to go into a written agreement with somebody, that the name on the sawmill or your access to the mill is good for the length of the contract, at least. Okay, this is very important because Um, when I started out in business, I had borrowed some things from my father to be able to get the business going better, all right? And some of those things were inherently his. They belonged to him, whether it was a backhoe or a cement mixer or whatever it was. And when he wanted it back, he had every right to have it back, unless I had some kind of an agreement with him. And believe me, even though it was my own father, we would write out agreements so that there was no misconceptions with the wives in case something happened to the men. If my father died and my mom knew I had the cement mixer, she may say, well, bring that cement mixer back. Or whatever it might be. Pickup trucks, it doesn't matter. So I'm just saying, make sure you have access to the saw. And if you own it and you own the property, great. But you understand what I'm saying? You need to have access to it to fulfill this agreement that you're about to sign, that you're developing here. Okay, so then some of the other things, like the responsibilities of the parties. So like let's say in the first paragraph you have it written down who the people are, and now you're going to put down in there what are the responsibilities of the party. Well, it's your responsibility to supply to someone, like maybe, let's just say 1,000 board feet of red oak. Let's just say that. And it's their responsibility to pay you, okay? Those are the two main responsibilities. All right, so you'll work that into a contract, and like I say, it would be nice if you had a lawyer to just help you write the contract. You don't need to pay the lawyer, day after day. If he types out a nice contract for you and it says everything you need, you can just pick and choose names and replace the contract or the items in it with whatever you need to do for the next person. And that's a good way of getting a good contract that's legal. So yeah, so you need to know the responsibilities of the parties and basically, who's going to be doing the paying and who's going to be doing the work. And, whatever, like if you say in there that they're going to deliver logs to you, you need to write that out, make it explicit. The logs need to be delivered by a certain date in order for you to have them cut by a certain date, okay? Now 1,000 board feet is only a day's worth of work actually, but let's say, it was 25,000 board feet. You would need to have those logs by a certain date to be able to cut everything by the date that the person who wants them. You know what I mean? So you need to figure that out and think about that and make sure that you talk about this. All right, so then there's the description of the work. This can get crazy depending upon how you understand things, and I'm going to say this, how neat you are, how clean you are, how precise you are measuring, and how definitive you are about knowing what kind of wood you're working with. Okay, so let's go down this a little bit. If a guy says to me he wants 10,000 board feet or 1,000 board feet of red oak, I'm going to ask him, does it matter if it's slab cut or, cut with the grain, going perpendicular to the flat of the wood. I can't even think of the name of it right now. But anyway, let me just keep going. I just lost the name of what that cut's called. But anyway, what type of cut do you want? Do you want any white wood in it? Do you want all heartwood? What do you want? And they'll tell you, okay? They usually know what they want it to look like. So in the description of the work in the contract, you need to put down, what they're wanting so that you're satisfied with knowing what it is and they're satisfied with knowing that you're going to give them what they want. So, do they want any white wood on it? Do they want only heartwood? This is the center of the tree, maybe a couple inches on each side depending upon the size of the tree naturally. What do they want? And do they want it dried? Are they willing to take, rough cut lumber and they'll dry it themselves? Or do they want you to dry it? Do they want you to plane it? Now, here's the biggest thing that comes up here in wood. Now you can say,
you can be living in Pennsylvania all your life, and you can tell me the size of a 2x4 is 1.5 inches by 2.5. And right now, if you go measure them, they're slightly smaller than that, some places, and some places they're not. It all depends on who's doing the milling. So what you have to understand is that not every person is going to understand that a 2x4 is not a full 2x4 all the time. Sometimes it's 1.5 by 2.5, okay, or 3.5 rather, I'm sorry. 1.5 by 3.5, or it might be 2x4. It all depends on what you're cutting. If you're cutting rough cut lumber, they may say, I want 2x4 in rough cut. They still may want it dried. So as if you're doing the drying and they want a full 2x4 after it's dried, you have to realize that and recognize whatever the shrinkage might be in order to fulfill this description of the work that you're going to do and what you're going to supply to them. Okay? So the size and thickness of the wood is very important. Now here's something else you need to think about. I notice that with the LT15, and any sawmill does the same thing, it doesn't matter. When blades get dull, things happen, and that's the way it is. But sometimes you could be cutting and you'll come upon a knot that might be a sound knot, but it's very hard, and it may make the blade rise and rise up and come down. It may make it go down and come back up. Usually it rises, but let's just talk about that. There's a difference. So you may not have that perfect 2 inches all the way down through. So you may have to specify according to your mill and stuff and how well you're cutting and what you're cutting. You may have to specify things like I'm cutting 2x4s within 1/8 inch or within 1/16 of an inch. And that all depends on what it is. Is it 2x4s that are dried? Are they planed? What do you want? And once you know all that, then you've got to be able to have the brains and the know-how to come up with the size of boards that you need to cut to be able to fulfill the guy's need. Now, once you can fulfill people's needs, I'm going to tell you right now, when you know how to cut stuff to whatever size they want and you can really make it happen all the time, your name will get around and people will know this about you. Okay, it's also, if you rip somebody off, your name will get around and people will also know that about you. So you want to be very careful how you attempt to take on, something that's a little bit more than just buying this board or buying that board off of you. So anyway, the description of the work is important and you need to think about that. If the guy says to you, I want 1x12, you got to realize 1x12 is normally 3/4 of an inch by 11 1/4 inches. So that's normally what that is. Well, suppose you cut that in rough cut lumber and you give it to him. Now he wants to plane it. He no longer has 3/4 by 11 1/4. So you have to be certain of what you're going to supply to him. Okay? And sometimes you need to even ask some questions, because let me just say this to you. The worst person to work for is someone who doesn't know what they're doing yet. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't build a nice cabinet. What that means is they may not realize the wood has different sizes to it. They may have ever bought, all their life, they may have bought, dried, planed wood, and they don't know what really takes place to get to that. So, I mean, a lot of people know about planing and people know about the size, but they don't know about the size of drying, what it takes to dry lumber. They don't recognize the size, once you plane it, especially if you've got some marks in it and you have to plane it down as hard as you can to get to where you're going. You need to have enough wood to give them what's left, will supply their need. Very important that you follow that. If you don't follow that, I'm telling you, you're going to have money problems because people are not going to want to pay you. Okay? So the best thing to do is to put that in writing. That's my opinion. Now, I know a lot of woodworkers do not. They don't want to have that headache. They don't care about that. And if that's how you are, fine. But I look at every board I cut. Every board. That's why people say, well, you're kind of slow at cutting. Well, first of all, I'm 60-some years old. But the point is that you know, I look at every board because I know what I would want. And if someone tells me what they want and I understand that fully, I'm going to give them what they want. I'm not going to give them what happened instead. And I've had a lot of that where, you know, somebody will say to me, well, I'll tell you, I'll give you a perfect example. I went to a car dealership not long ago. I was looking at something, and I says to him, I have a brand new truck sitting in my garage that's 10 years old, and he couldn't get that. Well, the truck, I never drive it. It's like brand new yet. Well, he still couldn't get that. He said to me, a guy told me he had a truck like new. I went and looked at it, and he must have hit the garage 5 times on his way in and out over the past 10 years. So, you know, I'm trying to tell him one thing, and he's not wanting to believe it. And these are the things that you're up against. So, anyway, you have to make sure of what you're going to cut, what you're going to give the guy, and that it's exactly what he wants. As long as it's what it is on the paper, good. Same thing with the straightness. Same thing with the bowing. He might not be unhappy with a cup that's a 1/16 of an inch. He might not be unhappy with that. He may say, yeah, I can use that. Okay? Or he may not be happy with it. Or he may not be happy with the bow if it has a little bit of a bend in the board. Maybe it's off 1/4 of an inch at one end. He may be okay with that. He may not be okay with that. He may look at that like it's a disaster. Okay? It all depends on what he's going to use the wood for. A lot of times people will buy 1x12 and cut it down. Okay? They don't necessarily want the board the size that they need. They want material to work with. And this way here, a bigger board will give you more chances to get the wood out of it that you actually want. Alright, so that would be a description of the work that you're doing. Now in this case, the work is only, you know, cutting the lumber to a given size. Now, you know, when you, just to give you an idea, you're talking about one subject here, the size of lumber. Believe me, when I was building houses, I had to have the description of every single thing that went in the house. So think about that. The doorknob, the door, the glass in the door. Okay, I'm talking about the front door. Were there shutters on the sides of it? Were there windows around it? You know, what was going on? The molding of the door. What kind of molding am I using? You know, all of these things were important, and that's why I had to have a contract to go along with all that. Now those are called construction documents, but in reality, you're constructing wood, you're making lumber. So you are actually constructing something. It's just that that's not the terms they normally use, but you still need, and I'll just say it, construction documents or documents to make sure of what you're doing. So, you know, these are things that you want to make sure you know how to do, that you know how to get the wood cut to the size that someone may want, and you're good at it, okay? Now this may take some time of giving away lumber to your neighbors and some freebies here and there until you get to that stage. It all depends on, you know, I mean, I've had guys call me to tell me they work in lumber all their life, they understand it completely and no problem. Then I've had people call me and talk to me about, you know, well, I just bought my sawmill yesterday and I don't understand the different sizes and stuff, or whatever. These are things you have to either read about or go learn about them somehow, somewhere. You know, go to a lumberyard, talk to the people. If they'll talk to you, sometimes they won't. And sometimes they don't even know, to be honest with you. You go down to Lowe's, they hire young people out of school, they hire young people who maybe were working as an insurance man or something else, and now they're working in Lowe's. They really don't know the sizes of lumber. That lumber comes in various different sizes and grades of relative humidity. They don't know that. Okay, you have to know that, and you have to know what you're looking at. And then will you be able to figure out prices on this stuff. Okay, so that's description of the work. So we have the names and addresses of the people, the responsibilities of the parties, you know, you and what they're responsible for, and then the description of the work. Okay, and then after that, you're going to have something in there about the compensation. So in other words, how much money is this thing worth? So let's just throw a number out there, and I always use the number $8 a board foot for finished pine lumber, because that's what Lowe's gets for it. So I'll just use that to play with the number. So I'm going to put in there I'm going to cut you, 1,000 or 10,000 board feet of red oak at, let's say $6 a board foot or $8 a board foot. It doesn't matter. I'll say $6. So $6 a board foot. I am going to plane it, and I'm going to dry it. I'm going to plane it, and I have to specify, what I'm going to dry it to and stuff in the description. But anyway, for the compensation, like you're saying, okay, this wood is going to cost you $6,000, let's say. Okay. Now, how do you want to be paid? Do you figure $6,000 you can handle a loss of $6,000 if you cut red oak to whatever size this other guy wants? Okay, you cut it to 12-inch boards, and if you have a big enough place, maybe cutting them to you isn't an issue. I'm not saying it is. What I'm saying is it may be an issue. You may have 20 really nice red oak logs on site, and that's all you have at the moment. So you want to make sure that you don't write something down that you don't have, okay? So anyway, let's say you want $6,000 to cut these boards up for this guy, and whatever they are, length, and the lengths can vary sometimes, width can vary, but let's just say we're not into that now. That's in the description of the work. Right now we're talking about the money for the wood. Okay, so you say, all right, I want $6,000 to cut this. Now, do you want any money down? Do you want all the money up front? Now, this is something you have to be careful of. Let me just say this to you. If you're not good with money, then only take a little up front, okay? So you don't end up being screwed and having to get sued for $6,000. Now, depending upon who he is, he may sue you if you don't supply him with the lumber. So you have to be careful with how you're doing this, especially when you have a written agreement. Now, a lot of people don't use written agreements so they can get out of stuff. I don't go for that. I want to do the job, and I want to be paid for the job. So that's why I write the agreement up. All right, so anyway, I want $6,000 for 1,000 board feet of lumber. Let's just, whatever it is, and that's described elsewhere. And I want you to give me like 1/3 down to start, and then the 2/3 when I'm finished. Or you may want 50% down to start, and the rest when I call you and tell you it's done. And you want it within, say, 2 days of the phone call, or 3 days. Because sometimes people will take your stuff and they'll say, oh, okay, so now, you got to wait a little bit until I pay you, maybe a month. Well, what if you needed that money to run your mill for the next job? You're out of money. Okay, so, you want to be careful with how you word this. You also might want to put down, like I say, that they come and pick it up or whatever, and, the payments reflect that. Now, it doesn't matter how you do it. You can do it any way you want, but you should have something in the written agreement for how much it is and what has to happen for this to take place, okay? So these are, part of the compensation part of the agreement of how much this thing is worth. The other thing with that, then, the next section would be effective dates of the contract. So in other words, like let's say the guy comes to you the 1st of April, and you have a mill like I have, which is totally outside, and he wants a certain type of lumber. He wants it dried, and he wants, certain other things to happen. Okay, well, I can dry lumber fairly quickly if it's nice out, down to, 8% in a month's time. But what if it's not nice? What if it rains constantly? Then I got to have another place to put it if I'm going to deliver it on a certain date. So these are things you have to be really careful of what you're saying. You can't guarantee somebody you'll give them lumber that's 8% when it rains every day and the only kiln you have is a solar kiln. You've got to have something else then. So you may not want to deal with relative humidity right off the bat. But I'm just saying these are, some of the things. So the effective dates is what we're talking about. These are the dates of the contract. When do you deliver the first load to me of logs, and when do I deliver the first logs to you? So you could start off with, if you're just getting started, you may say, well, the logs have to all be here on a Monday, and I'll have them cut by Friday. Now that gives you a couple days, hopefully there's no rain in there. And look, with a sawmill like I have that's totally outside, you may want to, look at the weather map, and hopefully it isn't like what we've been getting told to us. But anyway, this might be a good reason to put it under something so that you can work underneath a roof. I like what I have because I just love working out in the sunlight, but that's my thing and I do what I have to do. Now I will work in the rain if I have to, at least I did when I was younger, and I would say that if you're starting something new you may have to as well, okay? But you don't have to kill yourself at this. You can make this as good for yourself as it is for them. So let's say they say, well, I'm going to bring the stuff to you by April 5th, just for a date, and I need it by April 30th. Okay, that doesn't sound like a problem. So you accept that. So you put those dates into your contract, that the contract will start some, it basically starts when you sign it, except for a 3-day waiting period if that's what your state has. But you may say, well, okay, the contract starts on April 5th and it ends April 30th. So that means everything that's in there has to be done. And then what you want to do is you want to have something that reflects that. Some term in your contract, not just a term, but a paragraph or two if you need it, that explain the conditions of your finishing. In other words, you have 1,000 board feet. It is the relative humidity the guy wants. It is the thickness and length that he wants, that he accepts, and that when you cut them, that's what he accepts. If he wants all clear lumber and doesn't want any knots in it, that's back in the description of the work. So you'd have to have that written in there somewhere. So these guys, I decided I was going to go over some of this stuff and talk plainly and clearly. I mean, look, I attended some college for legal work and business. I can talk to you with all the fancy words that you might want to hear, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I found out in teaching that you're better off being plain Jane, okay, and explain it in the best way you can to let people know that. And then they'll pick up some of the other words themselves. All right, so anyway, I decided I was going to start this, and I'm going to continue with this until we get through to the point where you're actually, having what you need to do the work. All right, so also in that contract you would put things like your phone numbers, any kind of safety things, like you don't want the guy coming here. Like let's say the guy, okay, I have to bring the wood to you the 5th day of April, and the guy pulls in here at 11 o'clock at night. Believe me, people will do this. I've seen them do it. Sometimes truck drivers will pull in at 4 o'clock in the morning. You're not near open. You didn't even go to the bathroom yet from waking up. So make sure that, you're pretty explicit, like you would put down there the time, within the times of our business, like from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever it's going to be. Put that stuff in there. It's going to be important to you as you go on, so you don't have to put up with all this nonsense. And believe me, they will hand you nonsense, okay? I mean, that's how they would be if you're going to take stuff to them, so you want to be the same way. All right, so then, real quick, just to give you the idea, there's 6 things. So, in a written agreement, the names of the people, okay, the responsibilities of the parties, the description of the work, okay, the compensation part, how much money you're going to get paid for this, the effective dates of the contract, when you start and when you finish, okay, this is important. So make sure that if the guy says, I need the lumber by April 30th, and it's not sitting out there waiting for him to pick it up, you better start worrying where he is when the 30th comes. He needs to come and get it. If nothing else, put in the contract that you need to remove the wood by April 30th. That's a part of the contract. All right, so anyway, the effective dates of the contract, and then the conditions that define when the contract is finished. Date, time, description of lumbers, the different lumber that you're going to be doing, and whatever else has to be explained to you. I mean, somebody may say to you, I want white pine or hemlock, and they may say, I want it treated. And maybe you'll say, hey, I know one thing, I'd treat it for them. You know, I don't know if I'd do it the way I did on my videos where I rolled the treating on. Depends on how many board feet it is, but I'll tell you one thing, if they wanted it treated, I'd figure out how to get it treated. Because I do not like saying no to work, no matter what kind it is. So anyway, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation about, you know, the written agreement. Now, for your sawmill and the smaller contracts, you know, for a couple $1,000s, it should not have to be 12 pages long. But you better be very careful if you're dealing with somebody bigger. And let me just tell you something. I have seen big lumber manufacturers, or not lumber manufacturers, furniture manufacturers. I have seen big furniture manufacturers go out of business overnight. And I have seen little guys last for 30 years. Now that's not to tell you should pick on a little guy to give wood to, or you should pick for an older guy. I'm telling you, be careful, okay? Have a contract. Know what the terms are, you know, of the contract. Know what they can get away with and what they can't. And like I said, see a lawyer. Okay guys, well that's it for tonight's video. And I hope you're going to enjoy the next couple days of videos. I don't know how long I'm going to do them, but just, you know, if you enjoy them, just please let me have a comment. And if you want to understand something else that maybe I didn't explain, then just ask. I'm more than happy to answer the questions. It's what I do. All right, thanks a lot. Have a good one.